Intro. So welcome everybody to our bi-week webinar. For people that don't know me, I'm Ryan Poole. I'm the co-host here with Jim Brown. I'm an active agent, been doing this for over 20 years in the trenches with all of you. I'm also the founder of RealTrade, which is an online marketplace and social media platform for real estate. One of Jim's favorite saying is we're the home of the double dip. It's free for agents to sign up. And imagine this, you can have buyers and sellers contact you directly off your listings or find you out on the platform. So I want you to check that out. You can just Google RealTrade or go to realtrade.io and sign up, and the account's free. So awesome to have you, Jim, here. I know you had a big roller coaster here this last week, and glad to have you on the webinar, and it's always a pleasure. So Jim, you want to take us away?
Yeah, I'm trying to pull up my outline for how I want the show to go. I mean, it's always so long story short, I had a coronary event without using the big terms that everybody fears. I had a severe coronary event and a stent placed in my heart on Tuesday. And I will tell you this, I eat clean, I don't drink, I don't smoke, and I work out every single day. But genetics is a big part of what goes on. So as a PSA to everybody on the channel, don't take clean living like it's the golden gift certificate. You got to go out and you got to get your blood work done. You got to do all those things because life is a gift, and every day you got to unwrap it and embrace it and make sure you're doing your homework to get the gift the next day. All right, without getting too heavy.
Wow,
And without further ado, Ryan, I can't find my outline for every single show we do. All right, I'm just gonna have to wing it. So
here I have it, Jim. I can put it in the chat for you here. Hang on a second. Let me put it in the chat. Hang on one second. Chat.
here it is. All right. Crossing for Cystic Fibrosis is coming up. Don't forget to give those guys. When I finish the event every single year, I get text messages from all over the country, sometimes all over the world, thanking me for my participation. We raise almost $1 million every year between our corporate and our non-corporate sponsorship. I think we are now the largest impacting group in the world raising money for cystic fibrosis. Title advance, it works, use it. Like and subscribe. Don't forget about our closing cost calculator at the top of the page. It has all the little things that you need to stay compliant and get those numbers for buyers and sellers to show them. If you think it's confusing to you, where do you try to be a buyer or a seller who does this once every 3 to 5 years? They have no clue what you're talking about when you talk about buyer's credits and seller's credits. My goal is to tell you what you won't hear anyplace else. So I'm going to give you the contract. I'm going to give you the commitment today, but I'm going to tell you why it's important as far as getting your commission. And I've been to 1 million commitment reading seminars over the years. No one ever tells you why this is so important. At the end of the day, it's all about getting the commission and making the sale happen. Gonna keep it short. There's no dumb questions. Throw them in the chat. Text me 24/7. And I love the fact everybody has their camera on so I can see your faces. We're going to hit you with some time-saving tools at the end. Say that 10 times fast after you've been on bed rest for the last week. Time-saving tools. And you can text me 24/7. If you go to newpathtitle.com, you can click on 24/7 attorney support and get a hold of me anytime, and I'll always get back to you. And every time you send me a message, every time you come up with something, it always fuels the fire for future topics. And I guarantee you, any questions you have, there's 1,000 agents in Palm Beach County that have the same question. You got anything you want to cover before we launch, Ryan?
No, just glad to have you on the call, Jim. I know you've had a tough week here, and it's really amazing, and your dedication here to the real estate community, doing this bi-week webinar. It's been an honor hosting this here for almost 2 years now. And we've had some great issues, that you've covered and shepherded us through. And just very thankful you're here, Jim, and doing this.
Oh,
You're a big mentor for me, and I've looked up to you, throughout my real estate career, and glad to have you here today.
wow. That was unexpected. Thanks, Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
All right, today we are talking about the most glamorous, sexy part of real estate closings, title insurance commitments, right? Everybody lays in bed thinking about title insurance commitments. Not, but everybody knows there's two things you need to make a sale. You need equity and you need title. Everybody does the equity math. Very few people do the title math. So we're going to break down how to do that quick. Title commitment 101 for agents. Make sure you can get paid. Make sure you can get paid. And we'll go over why can is the operative word. Please text me 24/7 with any questions. I'm terrible at email, but I do get back to you if you send me a text. And if you do email me something, just text me. If you're in for a bind for time and you're looking at this thing, just scroll down. We get a lot of views on the web. So if you guys are on the web reading, listening to us, just scroll down to the main topic. If you like the way we work, in paragraph 20, write the closing agent is newpathtitle.com. We will save you time on your deals. I promise. We will, and I'm sure the escrow agent, and I'm not sure why the escrow agent is a box at the top of the form, but the closing agent isn't. And that's why you're going to write the closing agent in paragraph 20. But there is a difference between the escrow agent and the closing agent, and most real estate agents don't know there's a difference. All right, here's something new I want to do. It's called the market brief. I just want to quickly touch upon what's going on in the world of real estate before we launch into the topic. So the jobs report was just released. If you don't follow it, people on this podcast, I'm sure that are attending today, I'm sure do, but there's a lot of people who don't. Fortunately for workers, the jobs report was strong. Unfortunately for home sales, it was strong. And the Fed will not likely reduce interest rates until it's weak. And that is not known when that will occur. Inventory is currently at its all-time high for 2024. So our numbers nationally today equal last year of October 2024, which means between now and October 2024, inventory is going up. I have a couple of properties for sale personally, all are condos. I got my price reduction emails from my agents Monday AM. Thanks for not killing my weekend. I wish I had listened to my own sell advice a year ago when we were starting to talk about condos, but it's real and it's here. And yeah, condos are not what they used to be as far as retail. However, retail is strong pricing. However, that will balance out. That will hit an equilibrium. We're just not there yet. The algorithm effect, what I call the algorithm effect, is real. Algorithms do not know the difference between affected and unaffected condos. Affected condos are the price impacted condos by SB 10, right? They have the crazy assessments. Unaffected or uninfected are not impacted by SB 10 assessments. Unfortunately, in the algorithm pool, they all get lumped into the same category. And so you've got some condominiums that are getting dramatically impacted by SB 10, Senate Bill 4D assessments. And that's dragging the values down, and that's dragging the per square foot values down. And if you're in an uninfected condo, you're getting drawn down by the infected condos. It's just reality. Any comments on that, Ryan?
No, you're definitely seeing it. As an agent though, right? And I've been working with a lot of buyers lately here. It's like now's the opportunities, and we did do some great on a previous webinar of how to read the structural integrity, reports, and also the reserve study. And it's a really great opportunity to shine as an agent, saying, hey, there's opportunities here. You don't have to be scared if you know what you're looking at, if you're reading these reports, and you can see that the condos are well funded and that they have done their tests and their study.
So the really cool thing about buying a condo now is, let's say you have a client that wants to buy a condo for their kid or something. If you want to get your kid into a condo, or you want to buy a condo for yourself and have predictable expenses for the next 30 years, guess what? You're going to have a more predictable expense event, life than you are if you go out and you buy your own unit, because you're going to get this report that shows exactly what's coming down the pike. When you move into your single family home, you could have a roof or a water heater or whatever go out really quickly. Now you're going to have something that's been tested and laid out and budgeted and very, very, in hindsight, accurate. All right, launching right into commitments. Every agent knows they need one, but most agents throw them in the file and don't know what they say. We'll demystify the black box. That's why I mentioned if you had read the outline, Ryan. So title is a black box. Everybody agrees. You throw the title in you throw the contract in one end, title pops out the other end, and there's a bunch of fees attached. And we're going to talk about why, but that's not the important part. The important part is make sure there's money to get paid and the road to closing is smooth. Agents need two things to get paid: equity and title. You always do the equity math. We talked about this before. Make sure you do. Make sure there's enough money to pay your commission. I'll show you how to do it quickly. The title math to make sure there is enough for everybody to get paid. This will be your best 15 minutes you ever spent on any one file to make sure you're going to get paid. How to read the commitment in a minute. 1 minute. That's all it takes. How to do the commission math in 10 minutes at the longest, and the commitment shortcut every title agent should take. It takes 2 minutes. It's a title advance. Think of title insurance like hazard insurance, but it insures over things that happened in the past. And everybody says, what does that mean? Buyer closes on Monday. Tuesday, somebody knocks on the door and it's a roofer, and they say they never got paid 3 months ago for work they did, and now they're going to lien the house. What does the buyer do? This is a perfect example of a claim covered by title insurance. You don't have to have title insurance by law. Anybody spending more than $10,000 on real property should buy title insurance, though. It's cheap and it works, and the claims aren't frequent, but when they happen, they're a couple of $100,000. They're $500,000. They're $200,000. The last claim I saw was $219,000, the full claim, and it paid. What does the contract say on the issue of title? And if there's not enough for agents to track, and remember, on top of the inspection period and loan approval period, there's a title delivery due date that can derail your deal if it's not met. We use it all the time. If the title agent's late and we're representing a buyer and they want to get out of the deal, the first monkey wrench we throw in the deal is the seller was late on delivering title. We didn't have enough time. We don't want to close. Make sure they're delivering it on time. Title Leap does it for you. Line 155, this section spells out what has to be delivered and when. The party paying for title is responsible for the commitment. That means if the title agent fails, whoever is responsible for it failed. If title is not delivered on time, the party paying for title is typically in default of the contract. In Palm Beach County, it's the seller. So the title agent's late, the seller's late. Title Leap serves the dates to everyone in the deal. If you're not using Title Leap, make a list of the dates on your own if the title agent doesn't send them to you. Line 371 and 386, the standards. This section spells out the rights of the parties. There's lots here. Read it. Big takeaway. Just be aware there is a title objection and remedy period. We saw an agent use this the other day. The attorney was not super savvy on how the mechanics work, and the attorney thought they would just object and they would get out of the deal, but the seller has the right to cure. We can go into that. That's a whole nother show. Just be aware that there is a title objection period. All right, here's the main topic. The one single thing that every agent must know about title to make sure they are getting paid. Schedule B1. We're going to go over the commitment. Schedule A shows who's getting insurance and how much and what property. Schedule A is just like the roadmap to coverages. You can see it right here, Ryan. Is it blown up big enough?
Can you just zoom in a little bit more? There you go.
So here is the first page of a title commitment. A title commitment is not a title policy. The commitment is issued before the closing. The policy is issued after the closing. The commitment is your roadmap to closing, and Schedule A just says who's getting insurance. So here's the date it was issued. Here's the amount and who's getting insured. You don't have to worry about the type of interest they have in the property because 99.9% of all our deals are title. However, you can get title insurance over a lease. So, but don't even worry about that. It names, if there's a loan, it has a mortgagee amount. You don't have to worry about that. Here's one thing you would want to look at, and you just want to make sure that the vested party, the party in title, is the named seller in your contract. That's the first little takeaway. Not a biggie. 99% of the time, everybody gets that right. But where it says title is vested in on the date of the commitment, you just want to make sure that's the same party that's selling your property. You don't have to do it. I would do it. We just saw a deal derailed for several weeks on this issue. Make sure the legal descriptions match. The legal description in the title commitment should match the legal description in the contract. Yeah, on the list of things to do, I think it's important, but it's not an A list. I'm going to go over in a second
I
what
have seen agents just they'll put in, they maybe had it saved in, app files or, form simplicity from a previous property, and not changing the legal description. Make sure that's a good one. It takes 2 seconds to check out the property appraiser's website for that.
Well, I'll give you two examples since you dwelled on legals for a second. I'll give you two examples of where legals went awry. First one was sale of a piece of property in Palm Beach. The short legal description in the property appraiser's record did not mention an easement to get to the beach. And the people who were buying the property were spending several $1,000,000, and they wanted the easement to get to the beach. It was a back alley easement. So the real estate agent copied and pasted the legal description from the short legal from the property appraiser's record, put it in the contract, went to closing. The day before closing, the seller tried to lever the buyer for another 250 grand to get the easement to the beach. The deeded easement said the short legal, and it said the easement to get to the beach through the back alley. So the short legal didn't mention the easement. The full deed legal did, and only the short legal was in the contract. Well, what's the buyer buying? Whatever's in the contract. They weren't technically buying the easement to the beach. So the buyer ended up winning. It cost a bunch in lawyers, and it's closed. But it was a delay, and it was an unnecessary delay had somebody read the legal description off the deed.
Not the deed, the
And
previous
put it in
deed.
the contract.
Brent actually made a great point on that. Use the previous deed for a legal description.
Yeah. And the only exception to that would be if the last deed was a quitclaim deed, go back till you get a real deed drafted by a title agent. And that's the only exception time to that for the most part. The other thing is don't write in PCNs. Property control numbers can sometimes be smaller than the piece of property the seller intends to sell. So we just saw a real estate transactions recently where the buyer intended to buy 5 lots. The seller named the property in a PCN, and that was only naming 4 lots. So the PCN named 4 lots. The buyer intended to sell 5, intended to buy 5. And during the process of the transaction, we figured out that there was a problem with the legal description, and had the seller taken 2 minutes and listed all the properties in the deeded legal, like Brent just said, there would have been no problems. Nobody read any legals. Everybody signed the contract. It came to closing, and then our new attorney, Matt, ferreted out the issue where the property mentioned, the sales contract mentioned 4 parcels, and the buyer wanted to buy 5. And I've seen that several times over the years where the PCN, the property control number, the tax ID number is smaller than the property that the seller intends to sell, and more importantly, the buyer intends to buy. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Schedule B1. So this is your roadmap. This is the title insurance commitment. This is the agent's roadmap to closing. If you guys don't remember anything about anything I've ever told you, there's 3 things I want you to take away. First is put buyers and sellers' signatures, put buyers and sellers' addresses right below the signature line in the contract so you get legal notice. I can't tell you how much money is sitting in our trust account because they aren't getting legal notice to occur because they didn't put addresses in the contract. The second thing is the seller's disclosures rule in Johnson v. Davis printed out in the contract. That's the second thing I want you to remember. The third thing I want you to remember, if another heart attack doesn't take me, is I want you to remember that the title, that the Schedule B1 of the title insurance commitment is your roadmap to closing. This is the list of steps the title agent has to take to close the sale. On the page marked B1 requirements, we're going to go over what that looks like in a second. Who has to sign the deed is on there, corrective deeds or anything else. What mortgages are on there, what mortgages have to be paid, what liens have to be paid, and to who, and whatever else is on the property, unpaid homeowners associations, things like that. We got a small group. I'm going to ask a quick question. What is the difference between the list of items that shows up in the title commitment and the list of issues that show up in a municipal lien search report? So let's just imagine you have a code violation. Let's just imagine that in your municipal lien search report, it shows a code violation for unpermitted electrical work. What does it take to get that code violation in the muni report into the title commitment? Because it's not a title issue. If it's only a municipal lien search report, what has to happen before that municipal lien search issue shows up in a title report? Does anybody know?
If you
Judgment.
put it in the clauses of the contract, that all
Okay.
liens have to be removed prior to closing?
But that doesn't make it a title issue. That makes it a contract issue. Who said judgment?
Man straight.
So it'd have to be a
Me.
judgment or a lien that's
Brian?
been filed.
Yeah.
Yes.
Brian, I'm buying you dinner before the Toasters show tonight. Once that code violation goes before a judge, and the judge says, we're going to start fining you a certain amount a day, then that becomes a lien on real property. Then it shows up in the title commitment. But code enforcement issues and violation issues and all those things only live in a municipal lien search report, are not title issues and are going to be resolved between the parties, not in title. Once there's a judgment and the judge drops their hammer and says a violation is found and a lien will be imposed, a daily lien, now it's going to transfer from the title, from the municipal lien search into the title commitment. All right.
I
We're
will
gonna
say this,
do-
just add this real quick on section 20 on the contract. I always write in there seller, even if I'm representing the buyer, obviously, seller to close all open, inactive liens, all permits, everything, write that in there.
Got some magic contract language I can
I know
share
that
with you guys.
you've helped write that up, Jim, which is awesome, which I put it in every single contract I have.
Well, we're tweaking it all the time, so we're adding words to it and taking words out of it. Why? Because different municipalities have different terms for open permits, and you get savvy buyers attorneys that go, oh, we're not closing because you didn't call it a this. And so you have to constantly be updating the thing. And so I'll share with you the link for magic contract language, and that we're always updating it, and I don't mind if you guys use it.
Yeah.
So here's the Miami Formula One title evaluation. So if anybody watched Sunday, Formula One was in Miami, and it was the first 15 or 20 minutes of racing was some good racing. Brian, did you watch that?
I watched
I
a little
did
bit of
not.
it. Yeah.
What's that?
I was at a car show.
Oh, all right. I thought you said I didn't know. I was going to say, what?
Get
So-
a big fat trophy for the car show this weekend.
Oh, cool.
Nice. So this is the good, clean, green flag, speed to the checkers, Miami Grand Prix version of a title commitment. Here's your Schedule A. Says right there, Schedule A. Scroll down. Here's Schedule B1. If you remember nothing else, the three things: addresses in the signature line, seller's disclosure rules, and B1. B1 is your roadmap to closing.
Can you zoom in a little bit on this, Jim?
Yep. So here's B1. This is just a bunch of language that says we got to review everything. We got to pay everyone, pay the premiums and the fees. Now, here's where the stuff starts to get good. Documents needed to make the thing close. A warranty deed from the seller. You're going to know it's your seller because that's the person named in the contract. If there's a warranty deed or a quitclaim deed, but needed by somebody who's not named as a seller, bing, bing, bing. Luckily in this one, the seller lines up with the contract, we're all set. And a mortgage from Gentino Investments, so it's a private money mortgage. So they want two things signed, a mortgage and a deed from the seller, who happens to be the seller named in the contract, we're all set. An update of title must be completed just prior to closing. This is just for us. All right, here is a typical title insurance commitment. We're going to record a satisfaction of the mortgage from the seller to a lender. It's got a book and a page. Here's how you do the equity math. You go to the public record, you take that book and page, you see how old the mortgage is, and you do a guess as to the value of the mortgage. You need a survey to close this file, so we can delete the standard survey exceptions. This is just something for us. This is for informational purposes only about taxes. This is for informational purposes only about a 24-month chain of title. This is something that says that the buying entity must be confirmed that it is in fact an entity. These are all standard clauses that you're going to see in any commitment, nothing to be alarmed or concerned over. This is where there was another title product issued on the same property. And a completed IRS currency transaction report. This is just for us. Execution of a closing affidavit. Everybody signs a closing affidavit at closing, saying that there are no judgments in the public record that the title agent's not aware of, and then that the title agent must pay it out. So here's the important ones. And these are the things that what you focus on, not the standards that you see in every policy. And this is the only thing that stands out in this file, the satisfaction of mortgage. So you take 2 seconds, you take the book and page, you go to the public record, you see it's a 2020 mortgage for $400,000, and you know that thing's been paid down upon. Why? Because you don't see a judgment. That's a good indication that they're not late in the public record, which we'll go over in a minute. And you do the little bit of math in your mind, and you know there's plenty of equity.
Yep.
That's
Hey, Jim.
Yep.
If I add two things real quick, go. Always obviously do a quick search, look for Liz pendants to make sure they're current. And two, if you just do a quick Google search for amortization calculator,
Yeah.
you can go ahead, put in the original loan amount, assume it's a 30-year loan, don't assume it's a 15-year loan, and just guess on an interest rate. It'll spit out ballpark, what that payoff would be, however many months forward you want to go. So that's, instead of guessing, if you're not great at math, that's it.
And if you have a
literally takes 1
judgment,
minute.
same thing. If you let's just say you find a judgment, that's a good point, Brian. You can go to a mortgage calculator, and you can even blow up the value of stuff going forward. So you can have compound interest calculator, and if you have a judgment, let's just say there's a spousal support judgment for X amount of dollars. You look it up in the public record, and it's 10 years old. You can figure out the current value of it.
Right. Well, and if there's a Liz pendants, you're going to want to throw $20,000-$30,000 in attorney's fees on there for the bank as well.
I wish, but yeah.
Well, I know. Well, I'm not talking about the defense side. I'm talking about the
The plaintiff side.
Yeah, the plaintiff side.
I want to add this real quick too, because this is the feature that you brought up a great point, Jim and Brian here. And this feature that I use that's on the MLS is when you go onto the listing, right? It's on the MLS. It actually has a link to the IMAP tax info, right? So you click that link right there on the listing, right? And it pulls up the IMAP tax info, and it'll tell you if it has a mortgage and what the amount and when it was, when it was started. And it actually gives you the interest rate and how many months. It's pretty cool
Where is
too.
that at?
So that's, yeah, just go,
I
let's
never knew
say,
that.
yeah, no, it's an awesome tool. I use it all the time just to see, and it too, it'll also tell you if it's in list pendants as well, on there as well. But so you just go to the listing, okay, on MLS, on Flex MLS, and you'll see a tile at the top of the
It's a
listing.
link at the top. It says
Yeah.
IMAPs.
Oh,
It'll
IMAP.
give you the property information, and you can also do a quick search for comparables so that you can see if there's any that are private sales that you're not seeing on the MLS, so that when you go to do your CMA, you can see that as well.
Yep. I was just going to say that too. It's
Iron
great.
sharpens iron. I love this.
It's a good tool. You know what I mean? And you can definitely, obviously see what they, what they paid for it when it closed. So it's pulling in the county tax rolls, but it has the mortgage there too.
Wow.
I know.
So here's an example of a lot of work to close, yellow flag, maybe even a waving yellow. That means everybody's got to come to a halt, to a real slow crawl. This race could be over. So here's an example of a commitment with problems. So you have Coach Street, limited number of trust. This is Schedule A, here's Schedule B1. So now you start combing through Schedule B1. You've got the standards at the top, like we talked about earlier. Now you get to where the deeds the drafting has to happen. So you have a warranty deed from the seller and the co-trustees and the declaration of trust. Not a big yellow flag, but you got to start lining up your trust documents and things like that, because the title agent's going to ask for it. You looked at the title, hopefully, before you even sign the documents. You've hopefully the listing agreement. So hopefully you've had those conversations earlier. Waiver of the right of first refusal of the written consent of the board of directors for the HOA. We all know what that means. I don't know why this won't highlight, but that's B. And can you see my cursor, Ryan?
Yep.
So here's a standard, an update of the title must be done. Okay, now here's where your antenna starts to go up. Your spidey senses start to tingle. A judgment recorded in the official book of records. So you can look this up in 2 seconds. You're going to see it's a mortgage foreclosure case. Oh, surprise, surprise. Your seller didn't tell you they were in mortgage foreclosure, like this transaction here. Then you have satisfaction of the mortgage from the seller. This isn't unusual, but this will be the mortgage, hopefully related to this foreclosure. You can tell by cross-referencing the loan numbers. Sometimes they'll have loan numbers just to make sure they line up, but it doesn't always. File release with Florida Department of State for that certain federal lien against the Gottlemans, the sellers. So now that's going to be a problem. This is all public record, so sharing this stuff isn't a problem. But you got to now think, what does this mean? So you pull the document, you're going to see it's an IRS problem in concert with the Florida Department of State. That could be a mess. Anytime the IRS is involved, it's going to be a giant set of brakes on the transaction. You got to record the satisfaction, release, or credible proof of non-identity relating to the following certified judgments. Now, they're going to give you a list of judgments. You don't do this. You could if you wanted to, but the title agent's going to contact the seller and make sure none of these are the seller. If they are the seller, what has to happen? They've got to get paid at closing. So now you got to do the equity math on each one of these things. And you may want to reach out to your seller before the title agent does and say, hey, or your conversation might be, hey, I saw a bunch of judgments. I just want to make sure we're closing. Are these all you? And then hopefully they say the title agent already called us and they're not all us. And if they don't say that, then you have to do the math on each one of those. And that's what we were talking about earlier. Brian pointed out the mortgage calculators that are available online. You can also get a future payment calculator or a future interest calculator or a future value calculator. punch in the value, the interest rate, figure on 8% for a judgment, and you can get the value today. If you have an old judgment in there that's 20 years old, a $15,000 judgment could be $100,000, and a judgment could be 20 years old if it's been recertified at the 10-year mark and be enforceable, be a lien on real property. So you got to escrow the funds sufficient to eliminate the liens if the judgment or the judgments recorded in this. You got to look that up. And that's another judgment against the seller for a New York City judgment. They revised and they appeals court. Okay, so there's a bankruptcy and there's an appeal pending. Another red flag. Property Owners Association estoppel letter, that's standard, but it gets better on that issue. So you got to get an HOA payoff letter. A survey, we've seen that before. That's standard on any single family home. This is a standard. The company has no liability on this commitment. Intentionally deleted. So there was a bunch of IRS stuff in here that we had deleted because we knew enough about the file that we could get it deleted. 24-month chain of title. Taxes were not paid. So here's taxes that are going to have to get paid off in the closing. And they added it so that when we went back and we asked them to delete certain things, the title insurance underwriter took a harder look at other issues in the file, and they added record a satisfaction or release of that certain claim of lien from the homeowners association. So while the file was in our office, it took so long to close, they weren't paying their HOA fees, and now the HOA has a lien. That has to get paid off. Execution of a closing affidavit, and that's a standard we saw before. Closing funds must be dispersed. That's a standard we saw before. So that is an example of a title commitment that's a mess. And that's what I listed in here under messy commitment. There's Department of Revenue and IRS entanglements that are going to take a while. Doesn't mean it can't be done, but this thing's been in our office for 6 months and it's not done yet. It might get finished, and we're working on it on the legal side, but it's one of those files you want to be aware of. Okay, here's one. Probate. Waving yellow flag will slow the race, but not likely stop the race. So you read through your title commitment. Again, savvy agent skips right to B1, deletes over the first few sections.
Zoom in, Jim. Yep. There you go.
Deletes over the first few sections, gets right to the deed. Deed from Todd Phillips individually and a successor trustee under the Edward Chafflant Revocable Trust, blah, blah, blah. And you got to record. And so under the list of documents to satisfy the title company to convey title, you also have record a deed from the personal representative in an affidavit. Personal representative might not stand out in your mind as something dramatic, but if you know what you're looking at, that means there's a will. When you talk about successor trustees and beneficiaries, those are trust issues, but when you start talking about personal representatives, those are will and estate issues. Written consent of the board of directors, this is typical. You get that HOA or that COA purchase approval. An update, we talked about this before, this is a standard.
Yeah, I got a quick question. Like when you close a file, when was like, let's say it closes on Tuesday, when do you do that last title search?
Right before it closes, and then we do a gap search about 2 weeks after it closes to close the gap.
So are you talking like that morning or that?
We do that. We do it moments before we go to the table. We do an update, and then we do what we call a bring down a couple weeks after the closing. So the update searches title up to about 2 weeks before the closing. You have the seller sign an affidavit, the buyer sign an affidavit, closing that little gap. And then after you close, you do an update another 2 weeks, closing the 2 week gap before the closing.
You know, I just wanted to add something real quick. I had this crazy deal one time where this elderly gentleman was selling the house to my investor, and literally the day of closing, an hour before closing, the son went and filed a quitclaim deed that he owned the house.
And now they didn't discover it until after the closing.
Yeah. It was crazy. The son ended up being a scammer. He had a fake quitclaim deed, but it took.
And it got thrown out, but it still was a giant headache.
Yeah.
So here was your first warning that it was a probate file where it said personal representative. You don't really know what that means, maybe. Then you see here, record a petition for administration. You still don't really know what that means, but that's your second indication. And now here's your third. Record the order admitting the will and if homestead affidavit of a person with firsthand knowledge establishing that Edward C. Crouch, decedent, was not survived by a minor child. If nothing hits you over the head that this is going to be a probate, right here, decedent. It's gonna need an estate. It's gonna need a probate action. Here's another clue: proper proof of proper estate clearance taxes must be recorded. This is getting back to the trust and why you got to get a copy of the trust early in the file. Recording of the certification of trust confirming the information required by Florida statute 736. There's a mortgage. Record satisfaction of mortgage. Condominium estoppel letter, property owners or homeowners. So this is a nested community. So there's 2 estoppel letters needed. There's your taxes statement, some outstanding taxes, 24-month chain of title, execution of closing affidavit. So here's 2 more standards. So this is an example of the probate. You got 4 clear indications that this is going to be a probate. If it doesn't hit you over the head prior, by the time you get to the end, you see that word decedent, you got to understand it's going to be a probate file. And trust me when I tell you, people don't understand that it's got to be a probate. You got kids selling the properties of moms, and there's a million warning flags along the way. When the title doesn't line up with your listing agreement, we still see the contracts come to this office. It's not a matter of you doing your job. I think everybody on this podcast knows how to identify a probate. The problem is if you're representing a buyer and the seller doesn't, and you don't peel back the onion layers, you're going to be doing a whole lot of work for nothing. And I've seen savvy buyer's agents uncover this stuff. Go ahead, Gia.
I have a question. At what point, maybe you went over this and it went over my head. If a property's under a trust and the trustee, the seller, had passed away, and there's a subsequent trustee, a secondary trustee,
Yep.
at what point does any kind of a trust go into a probate? Because I thought trusts don't go into probate at all. Is there any specific reason any portion would go into a probate?
Yeah, so it's called, there's what's called pour over wills. And so the trust pours over any assets into the will. It's you'd have to read the trust and you'd have to read the will to identify it. But yes, you can have trust property that ends up in a probate.
In a probate. So if I'm the listing agent and I say to the seller, I need a copy of the trust because we can't close without the copy of the trust, and I need to take a look at that trust before we even get started. I'm taking the listing. I always do this anyway. What specific language am I looking for in that trust to know whether or not any portion of the property or that I'm going to have any problem, or do I have to wait until the title commitment comes back?
That's why we have Gia on this show. So you're going to look for a really specific paragraph. Every asset in the trust is going to call out a beneficiary.
Okay.
In some trusts, you're going to get a statement that says that this particular asset is going to be distributed under the will. And that's the red flag.
That's the red flag. Okay.
So 99, I won't say 99, the vast majority of the time you're going to see in the trust, XYZ 123 Church Street conveys to Gia Ferrer. You know, it's going to go to Gia. And that's going to pass outside of the probate. It's going to pass under the trust. It's not a problem. But if you see certain items of jewelry, it's usually personal property and things like that to be distributed under the will, if existing or something like that, that's when you're going to have a trust that gets complicated by a probate and a will.
But that's for things like jewelry. It doesn't necessarily mean it's, but
it can be real property, yeah.
But can they separate it out, real property, from like jewelry and bank accounts and that kind of stuff as well? Okay. It's
It's
only
gonna
when
be in
they,
the, most agents don't read the trust. As soon as they see trust in the public record, they say, hey, we might need a, you know, a good agent says, hey, we're gonna need a copy, after you get the listing agreement signed, you say, hey, we're gonna need your copy of your trust for closing. I don't need it right now if you don't have it, but let's just, you know, start priming the pump with your seller. Because what happens is the agent that doesn't know the issues doesn't say anything, and then it gets to the title company, and the title company says, hey, we're gonna need a copy of your trust. What's the first thing the seller says? No one ever told me that. And I don't want to share that. And we've even had sellers that said, if I knew I had to share that, I'd never sell the property. Now, that's when the radar goes up, because you've got a seller that's bristling and maybe there's some nefarious activity, maybe, not always. But those are the types of things as a savvy agent you want to know early on. And again, the buyer's agent shouldn't be doing the seller's agent work, but you have to be thinking about all these things because there's so many seller's agents who don't know what they're doing. And your step of actually reading the will and making sure that the asset that's subject to the contract is going to be absolutely disposed underneath the trust is brilliant. It's just most agents don't go that far. But those are the issues.
Jim,
Yeah.
what I look for is, especially when I'm dealing with a probate, is the order determining homestead.
Yeah.
Because homesteaded property can be sold and it doesn't hold us up on our part. So that'll be added to the estate. You know, the proceeds will go into the estate. When they finish probate, that's their problem, but at least we can sell the property now and transfer title. And
And an
so
order authorizing sale. So it sounds like I'm preaching to the choir here, which makes me feel a lot better. But, you know, here's the thing. 90%, I will go a little further and say even more, agents don't know what we're talking about. And that's why we're here, and that's why those agents aren't. So, all right. Here's the benefit of being here, and here's where we're going to get a little bit more into the weeds. B2 is the schedule after B1. So you've got A, you've got B1, and then you've got B2. What is B2? B2 are the exceptions to the title insurance coverage. What does that mean? Think of title insurance like hazard insurance, and the exceptions are what is not covered in the event of a loss, like hazard insurance policy that has an exception for floods. The owner is not insured in the event of a flood. The basic rule, if you guys go far enough and you look at the B2s, and it doesn't come up much, but we'll come up with I'll give you an example of B2s that keep coming up over and over. The basic rule is whether the exception applies or matters to a buyer. If the exception applies to all properties around you, it's likely an acceptable exception. So if the exception applies to every property in the community, an easement for utilities, an easement for road right-of-way, or a road right-of-way, right-of-way, then that's an acceptable exception. If an exception only applies to your property, it's likely an unacceptable exception. There is an exception to the exception rule, and that's a lot of exceptions for one sentence: oil, gas, and mineral rights reservations. So here is the exception from title insurance coverage that keeps coming up over and over again as everybody becomes a little more savvy. Why? Because there was a loss. So here is your, we'll zoom out. Here is your Schedule A. We talked about what Schedule A is, all your insurance coverages. Here's your Schedule B1. It's a little bit different format. This is another title insurance underwriter. These are all the things that have to happen for closing. And now here is your Schedule B2. These are the exceptions from coverage. So the first exception from coverage is, these are all what we call standards, defects and liens. We've talked about this. This is the gap. Any interest or claims of parties in possession not shown in the public record. It sounds like a general exception, right? Easements or claims of easements not shown in the public record. Any encroachment or violation or adverse affecting title that would be disclosed by an accurate and complete survey of the land. So you remember, survey was a requirement under B1. It's an exception under B2 if you don't get one. Any lien for services, labor, materials in connection with improvements to the property. These are mechanics liens, taxes. So if this thing closed in 2022, taxes are going to be an exception from coverage. Don't worry, don't think too much into that. Any adverse ownership claim by a sovereign portion. So this is the change in water bodies and things like that. Any lien provided for Chapter 159 statutes. So these are special exceptions. Line 142 on the contract. Line 142 talks about municipal assessments. This is where that issue is addressed as an exception. All right, here's one that is an exception. This is a title exception. This is a perfect example of an exception that applies to every property in this community, and therefore it is acceptable. Easements and restrictions and covenants as set forth in the plat of Las Palmas Equestrian. It applies to every property in the community. No buyer can be upset about it. Restrictions, easements, and covenants, and easements which include provisions for private charge for assessments contained in the declaration. So this is your homeowners association declaration. It is an exception from coverage. You got an estoppel, it was brought current, but once you buy the property, you're going to get assessed, and you can't say, hey, I didn't know I was going to get an assessment. It's an exception from coverage. It could never be a title claim. Now, here's the one that keeps coming up over and over. This is what's called oil, gas, and mineral rights reservations. I don't want to go too deep into the weeds, but let's just say, I see Brent perking up because he has family that has mineral rights reservations on properties all over Florida. So at some point in time, an owner of the property a long time ago sold mineral rights to the property. How do you know it was a long time ago? Look at how old these deeds are, 3-digit deeds. So somebody owned the property and they sold mineral rights on the property. And what does that mean? They sold typically gas, water, and sand. Those are minerals. Here is another. So the owner of that property, if somebody starts mining gas, oil, and minerals under their property, they can't call the title company and go, hey, somebody's extracting our mineral rights, because it's an exception from coverage. Now, here's where it gets sticky. Here's another oil, gas, and mineral rights reservation. And it looks like it's a different deed book, so it's another reservation. But it's affected by the release of surface rights, exploration rights recorded in this deed book and page. So look at this. This last deed book and page, it's a 5-digit deed book and page. So that's a much newer transaction. So what happened? 1,000,000 years ago, somebody owned the property and somebody said, hey, I'll give you a couple grand for the mineral rights. And the seller, the owner of the property said, well, will you ever go on my property and take the mineral rights? And they said, yeah, we might or we might not. I don't know. We'll see. And the owner was desperate for cash and they sold the mineral rights. At some point later in title, somebody was buying the property or somebody owned the property and they said, I don't want that mineral rights reservation exploration surface rights on my property. So they went back to the person who owned the mineral rights and they said, I'll pay you some money. I don't want you ever coming on my property and looking for minerals, but you can go under my property and look for minerals. Is everybody with me?
Yep.
So there is a release for the surface rights exploration. To wrap this thing in a bow, it's this easy. If you buy property out west and there is a mineral rights reservation given away, that's fine. Let them take all the sand and let them, usually it's water and gas, and 99% of the times it's just water. Let them have all the water they want under my property. I don't care. There's nothing you can do. They have a well way over here. My property is over here, and this well is drawing, my property is over here. They have a well over here. The well over here is drawing down my water. I can't do anything about it. That's typical. When that becomes a problem is if the party with the mineral rights has the right to get on your property and set up a well, or set up an excavation station, or set up a extraction production facility. You do not want that. So what happens if you have a savvy buyer's attorney or a savvy real estate agent? If you see the mineral rights reservation on your B2 exceptions, make sure there's a release of the mineral rights. If not, your buyer can close on Monday, and on Tuesday, somebody can say, we want to come onto your property and see where your living room is. We want to drill drill a water well right there.
Jesus.
Now, I don't want you to read these things that closely. Just be aware of the issues and we can talk it through, because there are mineral rights granted with or without the right of surface exploration. But just be aware of the issue. And then
Are
here's
most of these mineral rights then out, like, you know, in Wellington, Loxahatchee, like those areas?
And then what are some of the hot communities out west in the Gardens? We just had one come up. Attorney texted me on Friday over one of these things.
Palm Beach County Estates, Country Estates.
Calusa, yeah, all those big equestrian communities. But you even have them even west of the turnpike sometimes. There are communities where the developer gave away the easement, the mineral rights, just west of the turnpike, just west of 95 rather. So you have a developer that owned 500 lots, 200 lots, maybe even 100 lots, and somebody who wanted to extract water went to him and said, hey, we'll pay you a bunch of money, give me your mineral rights, and the developer did it, and they've sold the property to a bunch of buyers who had no clue. Not a problem unless the party holding the mineral rights reservation has the right to explore the surface, has the right of access, has the right surface rights, any of those things. Here's one that would be problematic. Easements for ingress and egress created by the warranty deed from Rhonda and Associates to Sunglade Properties. What's the test whether this matters or not? Does this affect all the properties in the community or just me? And you would want to get a survey of this property and tell your surveyor, please locate that easement on my property. Two things. You see this reservation, you see this easement reservation, and it looks kind of, you know, private and not like it blankets a lot of properties. You would want to explore that further. You would want to tell your, I say you're the agent, you know, as an attorney, you would want to tell your buyer, hey, let's throw this on the survey. But if you're taking the time to read this thing and something comes up and it raises your hair, just send me a quick text and I'll tell you whether it's something for concern or not. But this is something as a buyer I would want to know. Does that easement go right across my backyard and I can never build a pool? It's as simple as that. Does this easement go across my backyard and I can never do a screened enclosure? It's as simple as that. It takes 2 seconds to tell your surveyor about it. You don't have to concern yourself typically with environmental resource permits, access easement granted for the establishment of an LLC recorded official record. This thing is full. This is like a porcupine quill. This is like a porcupine of quills, this B2. You'd want to explore this. Covenants and conditions is set forth in the restrictive covenant recorded. This is probably for the HOA. There's probably some loosely couple $100 a month, a couple $100 a year HOA. And this should come out in the standard commitment. This rights of parties occupying the property under unrecorded leases, that should come out. Because the seller should sign an affidavit, there's nobody in possession. So, mineral rights, just something to be aware of. The general rule is, if the issue that you're looking at only applies to your property, it's likely unacceptable to your buyer. If the issue that you're looking at in B2 only applies to your buyer, it's likely unacceptable. And how can you discover all this stuff? Use Title Advance. Title Advance won't get you your B2s, but it will get you your B1s. And it'll tell you about your probates and all those little certain things. Sometimes it won't tell you about a probate if there's no notice of death or, but a lot of the times it'll give you your probate issues. It'll always give you your trust issues. And I get 1 or 2 calls a day from agents because their deals are delayed or dead. And it's stuff that would have been revealed in a title advance. Somebody said, I think it was Ryan actually said to me the other day, how come you can't build your whole business on title advance alone? And it's like, here's the problem. People don't know what they don't know. And until the message gets out of how important this stuff is, nobody uses it. And we send it to the same agents over and over, but we very infrequently pick up new agents using it. And the agents that use it, I had one with conversation. Wendy's usually on the pod. Wendy called me the other day and she's like, oh my God, this thing saved my deal.
Yeah.
It saved me a lot of time.
I was gonna just tell Jim, it's an amazing service, guys. It's free for us agents. I'm using it on the buy side, and obviously too, when I'm working with sellers to see what I'm working with too, to make sure this thing, there's enough equity and not any crazy liens. But even on the purchase side, it takes literally 5 minutes to fill out the form. You can find it on RealTrade, right on your dashboard on RealTrade. Obviously, you can go to realtrade.io or New Path Title and find it there too. But it's an amazing resource. It could save you so much time.
So here's the one big takeaway from the show, B1. If you don't do anything else, flip your commitment open, look at B1. It's going to take 1 minute to find B1. It's going to take you 1 minute to read, 2 or 3 minutes to read B1. If the thing starts poking out with quills and you're getting barbed, you got to go to the public record, or you got to text me and we'll go to the public record together and start searching books and pages. And what's the tool called, Ryan, that you can use within the MLS to help you locate equity?
IMAP. It's super simple. Yeah, it's right on the listing, so when you pull up on the MLS listing, you'll see a little tile at the top say IMAP. Just click that and it gives you the details of the property, especially if there's a list pendants or if there's a loan, and it'll even tell you how much it is and what interest rate it is.
And if you like the way we work, and you want to control title, you want to send it our way and get title lead, use us, write us in paragraph 20.
Yep.
That's it, you guys. That's what I got.
Wow, Jim. No, that was incredible, guys. Thank you, Jim, for doing this, especially with everything that happened with you last week, for you to get here and share this incredible knowledge. I mean, there's some nuggets here on this, especially on the Schedule B, and just using title advance as well could save you thousands of dollars and hours
Lots of time.
Lots of time
of
burned.
time.
So, yeah.
I had an agent the
Question
other day.
on title advance.
What's that?
I have a question about title advance.
Sure.
Any way to get special assessments by a public body to
Yes.
appear on title advance?
If it's been recorded in the public record, and I can't think of any exceptions that don't, but it'll also show up on your tax record if you know how to read the tax record, and something, and they can be
But some
absurd.
places they bill it separately where it's not on the tax record. And that's where I'm having the tough time making sure, because when you get a contract and the buyer's agent checked off seller will pay all special assessments by a public body, and I want to verify that before I let my seller sign, and before we start arguing about, make it A so that it's, buyer and seller pay each, up to day of closing and all that. I want to check it, because just in case, so when I don't feel comfortable, I'll add a clause saying if a special assessment arises, whatever, I'll add language to cover my seller. But is there a way to check it when it's not on the tax bill?
Yeah, so there's always going to be something in the public record recorded, and it's going to say like special bond, or it's going to say special assessment, or it's going to say something. If they're going to tack on another lien to the property, it's got to appear in the public record.
But remember,
You
I'm
gotta know
talking
how to
about
read
something
it.
like for utility lighting or whatever.
In Del
That
Rey,
will
there's
appear in
a
public
little
record?
community, and this is the one that comes up over and over. There's a little community, and there's a dozen or so blocks. The same thing happened in Wellington, where they have a special assessment for some water installations they had to do in an older community to upgrade them to the newer community. And there was a bond, and there's payments due annually, and it's $900 a year, or about $900 a year, $1,000 a year, something like that. But if you're not paying attention and you're on the buyer side and the seller or the buyer if you're not paying attention and you're on the seller side and the buyer checks on line 142,
Mhm.
they select box A,
No, box B.
box B, they don't select A and they do select B, then the seller's going to be responsible for everything prior to closing. And here's the bigger problem that you fight as a knowledgeable agent. The agent that you're dealing with on the other side, what do they say to you? What do they say to you every single time? Oh, that applies only to.
To the HOA.
Thank
That's
you
what
for
they love to
finishing
say.
my
I tell them,
sentence.
no, that's not a
No, no,
public
no.
body. Yeah.
Oh, I never
And no,
saw
and then it makes
that.
me question, and let me tell you, when I
Oh, I said
represented a buyer
142.
and I say
I
for
gave
the
you the
seller to
wrong.
pay,
I gave you the
sorry,
wrong section. I'm sorry. It's not 142. It's
Right there, special assessment.
right
188.
there, right there.
So if they select A, now the seller's going to pay all those special assessments up until the day of closing by the public
Right.
body. And if they select B, now the seller's going to pay every special assessment until the special assessment is paid off. And in the example of Del Rey, it was $27,000. Last minute at the closing table, the seller said, "Oh, hell no." And they just said, "We're not going to close." And so the buyer's agent and the seller's agent had to come to the table with a little bit of money.
Yeah. So that's what I
But
try to
I talked over you.
avoid.
You were
And it's
saying something.
funny because you know that and I'll tell you a secret. So when I represent a buyer, I might check off B. And then when they, scream, I'm like, oh, so is there a special assessment that I need to be So to try to get more information from
To
them.
prompt them. Yeah, good
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah. So,
And
but
then
anyways, it's a good,
if you have
it's,
stuck parties and they say, oh, maybe you have a buyer's agent that's not super savvy and they insist on selecting B because they want to make sure, you can always say to them, oh, but check out what it says on 199. If neither option is selected, then A will be deemed. Why? Because that's the benign, that's the standard, that's what everybody expects. And that's how you
yeah.
can bring everybody center if they're
But
stuck.
again, so that's why I'm saying if title advance can check
You can.
for that, not in the tax record,
It's
but
got to be
if
something
it's
in the public
recorded.
record that is going to show that there was a special assessment for. It's not going to be worded. There's not going to be There's not going to be any like waving flag over it, red flag. It's just going to say something like, that's certainly recorded on book XYZ PDQ regarding utilities, something like that. It's going to be something relatively benign. It's not going to scream special assessments. Municipal assessments, but it'll be there. And if you take the time to look at the book and page, you're going to find the document you're looking for. You're going to
Okay.
find the answer you're looking for. Australia, I'm so glad you joined us. It's always a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank
I
you.
try never to miss this meeting, so.
Cool. How are things going in the general market for you?
Oh, it's tough. It's rough right now.
How long have you been doing it?
21 years.
So you've seen it high and you've seen it low.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we know as veterans, it'll come back. It's just going to be tough in the meantime.
Absolutely.
Hopefully
Absolutely.
during the good times, we squirreled away a little bit and we're sitting on that nest and we're excited for the return of good times. And there's a lot of agents that didn't squirrel away and now they're looking for, alternate means of employment, but
Yeah.
the ebb and
I
flow.
hear that a lot.
Yeah.
I just think here the good thing, especially in South Florida, is we're a little bit insulated. We're still got a high demand of people that want to come here, right? Even with the high interest rates and the tariffs and everything else, I'm still talking to buyers. Buyers are calling me. I mean, I've had 2 of them call me this week. Want to come down and look at condos. There you go. I'm like, create that urgency. It's a perfect time to buy a condo. Right now is the time. It's like almost rewinding the clock back 3 years.
I think that's a great topic for a mass marketing email.
Yeah, it is.
Prices are the best they've been since COVID.
Yep. Well, this has been awesome, Jim. Gosh, what some great nuggets on this one. Definitely helped me to read those title commitments, you know, on that and what to take a look for further. And two, like everybody, title advance. I can't say that enough. Title advance. It before you came out with it, it would have saved me thousands and thousands of dollars of commission if I had had
Time.
that and time as well.
Yep.
Cool. Well, thanks, Jim.
All right, you guys have a great day.
Thank
Glad
you,
you're here with
Jim.
us. Thank you
Yeah.
so much, Jim.